Good question. Everybody's trashing Ford. Everybody wants Max to leave. I've got massive faith in my mate Phil Prue, who's running that whole powertrains thing at Red Bull now, only because he does such a good job as a race engineer for David Coulthard all those years at McLaren. So it's probably wise there, actually. DC probably recommended him. But yeah, of course, Honda will, providing they're well managed, which Adrian will do now for sure. Ferrari, bit chaotic probably. Yeah, got to say Honda, I think. Let me think, who else? Merck, I suppose Merck and Honda. Yeah, Merck have enough experience with that electric stuff. It's fine, you're doing great. Well, that's your opinion. What a laugh. Got to have these moments, haven't you? There's a super chat. Mikazuki. What did you thought about K-Mag and his career? Well, yeah, very good driver. Very good touch, aggressive, massive aggressive approach to racing. But all his inputs really good, very soft inputs. Softer than Oscar Piastri's, I would say. Somewhere in the Lando class. But I think not quite in sync with what you need politically to be and the way you need to think in order to really continue to progress in Formula One. And I say that because he was at his best in his first season, really, wasn't he? In his first race almost. And I don't know what it was about Kevin. I just had so much time for him and thought he would go. I thought he would be, at least as good as DC at McLaren when he was there, had a career as good as that. And yet, I just don't know. I just think he just didn't progress mentally, in my opinion. Lovely guy, great guy, good friend, but difficult with Ron at that time. You had to handle Ron in a certain way, and he obviously didn't get the better of Ron. And the minute he lost the McLaren drive, it was kind of very difficult for him then to make up for it. Wolverine says, Houston, we have liftoff. Well, there you go. Sean M says, you're still the man in my books, Peter, even though you just messed up the live stream. You just have to repeat everything you said for the past hour, word for word. Well, yeah, thank you. Good luck with that. Short corners, they say. Just repeating that business. Have I ever told you the story about T.E. Lawrence of Arabia, about writing his autobiography, 7 Pillars of Wisdom, and writing it all in longhand manuscript and taking it to a publisher in Camberley? He lived in Reading. It was about 3 train trips away in terms of sitting on platforms and stuff. And he went down with the manuscript and had the meeting with the publisher, who liked it but wanted Lawrence to make some changes. So he went back to Reading by train that same day with the manuscript. And at Reading station, when he was waiting for the next train to get, not at Reading station, it must have been Didcot or somewhere like that. He went to the coffee shop, the tea shop, to have a cup of tea and a bun, and left the manuscript there before he got on the train. And when he got home, he realized the mistake, went back, couldn't find it, nobody knew where it was, disappeared forever. And that night he sat down and rewrote the whole of 7 Pillars of Wisdom. Can you imagine that? And here am I balking at having to do a live stream again. Yuki replaces Peter. Yeah, good. Don't stress, just start. Thank you very much. Everybody's very kind, aren't they? Nothing makes sense anymore, Peter. Yeah, it doesn't. Peter, short corners, well said. It didn't go out. You may have lost the first hour and a half. I don't think I have, because on YouTube now, confusingly, on my YouTube channel, everything that I recorded is going out right now. So how this can be going out live, I have absolutely no idea. But I'm assuming what I'm doing now will go onto the back end of what is going out live on YouTube. And about 6 o'clock tonight, you're going to get, I don't know how long a piece, which I'll then edit and cut the middle out of. This is why we like you, Peter. Marvelous recovery. I don't think it was. I was just panicking. Everything is good. Let's start. That was my manager I was talking to as well. His top man. He's in a meeting trying to help me do something else. And there was I giving him a hard time, saying, yeah, you should have been there listening. Okay, right. Kay with the good hair. For Lewis to already be beating Charles is pretty impressive. Yeah. He beat him in the sprint race. He beat him in qualifying. Charles was not good on Friday or Saturday in China, was he? But Didn't beat him on Sunday, and that's a little bit of a sign, I suppose. But equally, Charles needs to work on a few things as well. And, you know, why he was so slow on Friday is ridiculous. Martin Lee, you're alive, okay. Reto Hannah, this is the question I've been waiting for all day. I was going to say all morning, but it's sort of evening now, isn't it? Shout outs to Elfyn Evans. His performance so far this has been amazing. I totally agree. Not only this year, I mean, won the Japanese round of the World Rally Championship, the last round. Then he won Monte Carlo. Then he finished, finished second in Monte Carlo. And then he's won the last two. So 3 wins and a second in the last 4 rounds of the World Rally Championship. Elfyn Evans, not worthy of any mentions on the BBC News at all. And let's hear it for Gus Greensmith as well, who just won his class, the WRC2 class, in Kenya as second year in a row in the Skoda. Really good. And why do I say that? Because Gus Greensmith started life with Rob Wilson as well. He knows how to drive. Dog. Yeah. Dexter. 90 minutes are going into the ether. I don't think they are going into the ether. So let's just be positive and optimistic about that. Greetings from Switzerland. You talked about drivers ticking 4 boxes. Max, Charles. How many do Liam, Yuki tick in your opinion? I'd say Liam ticks the... I'm going to put car control and oversteer in the same box with an oblique, a dash, a forward slash, whatever you want to call it. Oblique, oversteer, oblique, car control. He definitely ticks that box. Natural aggression in traffic. I think he ticks that box. So there's 2 for Liam. I think Yuki ticks natural talent, high level of natural talent, 1 box. Ability to learn and be methodical, ticks that box. Understands the importance of driving with the front end of the car and making it work, ticks that box. Not afraid to expand his horizons and be self-critical, ticks that box. So I think he ticks more boxes than Liam. That gives him 4. And obviously Max has got more boxes than that, so I have to revise my box thing. But I think the boxes for 4 were related to other things in terms of just specific way of using a corner. I'm talking about overall drivers now. But Max, if Yuki ticks 4 boxes, then Max ticks about 7, I would say. David, who is now the official reserve driver for Red Bull? Well, that's a good question. I don't know. Irvin Lingblad? Is that how you pronounce his name? Arvin Lingblad? Hippie? I don't know. Probably is, isn't he? Or was it that Liam would then go back if they needed to, and then there'll be another reserve driver for Toro Rosso, who knows? Or sorry, Racing Bulls. Sema Dragon sums it all up with a smiley face crying. Yeah, well, there you go. Sean M, always double check your YouTube channel on your phone when you go live to make sure. I did. Well, I didn't actually when I went live. It's a good point. But I don't want to do that. I want to be all, seamless. Checking phones all the time. Anyway, you're right. I should do that. Hi, Peter. It's a very good point, actually. I should have the mobile phone up here next to me and just look at it. Shouldn't I? To make sure I'm live. There was I thinking for a millisecond that I might have run out of questions and gone through all the questions, but there's like 3,000 more. So it wasn't that. I think we've done that one from Sam, haven't we? Blame the Red Bull car, but it's not. Is it not? Yeah, we've done that one. I did that one. Scroopy Noopers. Do you think, Peter, do you think Red Bull have a development path towards a car only really suited to Max? No, I don't. I think they've got a development car that is the best they can do, and Max gets the best from it. Did I talk about Yuki while nobody was watching? Yes, I did. I talked a lot about Yuki and how he's been self-critical and how there was a key moment, I think, in the whole Yuki Liam thing when they went to that NASCAR dirt track, quarter-mile oval, in massive 600 horsepower stock cars, and Yuki beat Liam in an environment where Liam should have been being oversteery and car controlling. He should have been quicker than Yuki, and in a way that in a similar situation, Ayrton Senna would never have allowed himself to be beaten, or Nigel Mansell would never have allowed himself to be beaten. Liam was beaten by Yuki Tsunoda there, and nobody took any interest in that. Everybody just thought it was a Red Bull promotion, which it was. But to me, those things are always interesting and significant to think about. And in Starkiller, should they have kept Perez over Lawson? Well, Perez, in any given year, always has a few good races, doesn't he? And I assume Liam would have as well. And what we're talking about here is a good number 2 for Max Verstappen. And what Red Bull and Helmut Marko are talking about is the best possible driver to score the maximum number of Constructors' Championship points while not upsetting Max. It's 2 different things, really. And I don't really care about that second one. For me, I'm a purist, and I just think Red Bull at this point should be getting the best number 2 they have for Max. And to me, that would have been Sergio Perez, because he's a known quantity. He would have had some good days ahead, and he brought a lot of money to the team apart from anything else. I don't think Liam's bringing any money to the team either, or was. Scroopy Nubber says, what happens when Max leaves Red Bull? Well, yeah, when Max leaves, he'll go to wherever he goes, Aston Martin, I guess. If he does go there, probably be 27. If he did go there. So they would go well. What would happen with Red Bull? Well, Lindblad. Who knows? Yeah, there's enough young, good guys out there. They just don't seem to have that many on the contract, do they? But they've got a few, and there will be others coming along for sure. As I said in a piece with Cameron earlier this week, people have completely forgotten the likes of Teo Pourchaire or Fred Vesti. They're not even on anybody's horizon now. Vesti driving for Cadillac in America. I mean, I wonder whether that puts him in a position maybe to do something with that team, but F1. But at the moment, there's 2 good guys for a start, going with no interest around them. Frank W, how are your predictions for next race, and especially for Liam and Yuki? There's a pretty good chance Liam might out-qualify Yuki, actually. I think that car is a better car, and Liam he'll be very annoyed, very upset, very emotional, whatever, for a while, but then he'll just get into the team. They'll make him feel welcome again. The car will probably feel better than the RB21, and he knows his way around Suzuka. Didn't win there in Super Formula, but had a reasonably good race, pretty good race, actually. And so he'll be no pressure on him, no real spotlight on him, and he'll probably do quite a good job in that car. He is quick, and he'll do. Whereas Yuki, in a way, I mean, it's his dream come true. Massive spotlight on him in Japan. It's a shame it's his home race in a way that this is happening, because that will be a distraction. It'll be up to Red Bull to try and isolate him from all of that, and just to get him to focus and be calm about this race, and to say to him, look, you may not have a great Japanese Grand Prix, but we're with you for the year at least. Just relax and drive well, work hard. So assuming they do that, and Yuki is protected a little bit from the spotlight that he's going to inevitably have in Japan, then he has half a chance of going well. But he'll probably think, what is this thing I'm driving? Whereas Liam will think, nice to be in a racing car again. That's probably how it'll be. And don't be surprised if Liam is ahead of him, I would say. But it won't mean much. It's one race, But I think Red Bull, given the situation, have made the right choice, because they didn't do anything like enough work around Liam Lawson to get the best from him, and he didn't do enough work to get the best from himself in terms of how he needs to improve when the car is not good, and get the best from the car with these inputs, softer inputs, work more with the front end of the car, and not drive the way he's always driven in the past. And he didn't do any of that, and really behoves him to have done that over the winter, but he didn't. Whereas Yuki, I think Yuki will have more feel for the front of the car for sure than Liam. Coconut, if Liam outclasses Yuki now in the Bulls, wouldn't that be a massive embarrassment for Horner, Marko and Red Bull? Well, it depends what you mean by outclasses him. You mean over the year suddenly is always ahead of Yuki on the road and pulls away and scores more points? Yeah, I guess it would be. But I don't think it would be if Liam's just ahead of him in Japan for the reasons I've just said. I think there's a pretty good chance he will be ahead of him in Japan. But that doesn't mean it's not the right decision at this stage. You're fairly old, lad. Yeah, okay, all right. Keep rubbing it in if you must. Birthday coming up soon. But Let's see. Terry Neville's got a thing called Live Life or Love Live or something like that. Love Life in Belgium, where he's got these great cars you can slide around on the loose and on tarmac, sort of, the Race of Champions type cars. And I would be happy to race any of my viewers there on any given day. No problem. So there you go. The challenge is out. You can pay for the day, of course, but I guarantee it'll be fun. And you'll probably think, oh, Windsor's got a little bit left in him still. Andres Samarin. Well, don't Red Bulls look like a bunch of clowns now? Do they? It's quite cool that they've got two teams they can just do this with, isn't it? A bit more difficult if it was going on at Mercedes, for example. I suppose they could lean on some of their customer teams, but yeah, Marco can just say, well, this is why we have the two teams. Yeah, we can swap the drivers around. Well, in that case, let's see Max in a roaring bull, in a cash app. So Yuki in the Red Bull, yeah, I think, as I said, I think he'll go quite well. I think he'll do a better job than Liam when the car is not good, and it's not that good at the moment. But I'm not convinced he will necessarily be ahead of Liam in the Japanese Grand Prix for the reasons I've just said. Is this a downward trend, says Muscular Squid 9? Is this the downward trend of Red Bull, or do they rebound? That's a good team, and I think Christian Horner runs it pretty well. I think got to say, not brilliant management of Sergio Perez's driving progression over the last couple of years, and not brilliant management of Liam Lawson's either, an understanding of how they drive. No mention of Rob Wilson in any of the curriculum there, although Sergio did do some days with Rob before the Mexican Grand Prix. So that option was always out there, and none of it happened. And, even if Rob isn't 100% physically right now, a guy like Liam Lawson could still benefit from having 2 hours of Rob's time just talking to Rob about driving and about what he needs to be doing in order to be somewhere in the same stratosphere as Max Verstappen. Rob could do that for sure. But no, the drive has to come from the driver. It has to be the driver wanting to do that, and that's not happening. Marco Marsiglia, Ferrari come back next race? Well, I mean, there's absolutely no reason why they shouldn't be up with Mercedes, really. I think their car is as good as a Mercedes. Different. It's about the same in top speed. We saw maybe Mercedes are a bit better now on slow corners, traction, but Ferrari are pretty good on fast corners. Charles flat through turn 7 in China. And it's just a question of running it. And I don't know. Yeah, there'll be so much talk about the disqualifications that may impact the way they perform as a team in terms of getting the best from the car. They'll be so focused on that never happening again. Probably quite a lot of blaming going on for that, or not, as the case may be. And either way, that's not good. So obviously they do need to come back strong. They need to sort of be on the second row and be fighting for a podium, don't they, in Japan? Really, that needs to be their recovery. Difficult, George is going to be very, very good in the Mercedes around Suzuka, I suspect. And I can't imagine Max in qualifying is going to be slow. And you've got both McLarens bound to be on the front row, I would think. So, where Ferrari got to do a really good job, haven't they, to get there? Got another super chat. From S. Saavedra. Give us your thoughts on Indy drivers, Colton, Palou, etc., and whether they should look into a possible Formula One career. Well, I rate them both. I mean, I was heartbroken when Colton Herta didn't get his super license. That was ridiculous, I think, because there was a real opportunity for Formula One to have a real talent, and I really rate him. And the same with Alex Palou. Alex Palou was a protege of Adrian Campos Sr., who saw his talent and gave him an opportunity in GP3. And it was obvious then how good he was. And we've seen that in America. And more shame again on Formula One that they didn't notice that. He didn't have a massive amount of money to take anywhere, went to America. Good for him. He's done really well. Looks like he'll be champion this year when things continue to go this well. But great talent lost to Formula One. Two great talents. And interesting you mentioned both of those guys because I really rate them both. Yutesh Aurora, Yuki going to smash, make top 8 in Q3. Well, yeah, he should make top 10 in Q3. I think he will. There's a lot of pressure on Yuki. If he makes Q3, I think he'll be doing really well, to be honest, because it's not an easy car to jump into, as we know, and he's going to have a lot of attention, a lot of pressure for the first time in his life. Really, he's never had this much attention, and it's up to the team to get the best from him in that respect. And it's not going to be easy because Japan is a very special Formula One audience, and he's a very special driver, therefore. And Japan will have their own way of handling Yuki. Whereas, for example, Oscar Piastri does very few interviews with the Australian press. Yuki probably does quite a lot, I would imagine, with the Japanese press, and makes himself pretty available, because that's the way the Japanese are. They're very courteous. So that's going to be not distraction is the wrong word, but that's going to have to be something they deal with, and just put Japan under the heading of being a special race. And if Yuki isn't at his best this weekend, next weekend, then we need to, just remember that it's a one-off. Greyleaf Peter, I'd love you to give a breakdown of Yuki's driving style. What other drivers is it similar to? How can he improve? Thanks. Well, he is improving all the time. So, and he definitely doesn't lean on the rear too much. He's a Lando Norris with not quite the same softness, and he's a little bit earlier turn-in than Piastri is now, or George or Carlos Sainz, but not dramatically so, but he's got a softish touch, and that's nice. But and I think his other great talent is his Rubens Barrichello, Max Verstappen-like talent of just grinding a race out with very consistent lap times, managing the car as he does so. And he's done that demonstrably well in the last 18 months. So yeah, he's good. And a lot of that is stuff he's learnt and he's improving with all the time. I think Franz Tost probably had quite a lot to do with that. Actually, he should get some credit for the way Yuki's come along as a driver, and to be more than just to be self-critical, I think, is what Franz would have got out of him. Not necessarily telling him how to be self-critical, but to be self-critical. And that's a very important part of any driver's talent and makeup. So definitely has more feel for the front of the car than Liam. And I think that in that way he will get more from the RB21, because Liam's style is just to lean on the rear all the time. And when he gets that feel, then he's in Fat City, he's Liam Lawson. But if the back end's not giving him any feel, and it's flicky, and feels like the tires aren't right, he's got trouble. Then he can't use the front at all. So let's start the show, Peter says. F1 fan Maximal, what are your thoughts on why Red Bull only gave 2 races to Liam till he got demoted? Well, Red Bull didn't put enough emphasis on Liam to improve his driving over the winter, either through ignorance or believing that Liam himself would do that. I think I said that a few times. I thought Liam was bright enough once he's alongside Max Verstappen to really want to understand how Max drives a racing car and really try to improve in that area. Slightly shorter corners, softer inputs, not relying so much on oversteer and the feel of the rear of the car, and there's such wide entries as a result. But he didn't. And it's a bad indictment in many ways of Red Bull's system that they didn't say to Liam, why haven't you been doing this? This is what you need to be doing. They either didn't understand or still don't understand how the difference between a Liam Lawson and a Max Verstappen in terms of their style, or they just thought, wouldn't it be great to have Max at one end of the spectrum and Liam at the other, and then we'll get the best from both, and that'll give us a great racing car, which is a bit puerile in its, stupidity, isn't it? That's not going to happen. And so, yeah. I don't think You blame Liam Lawson for not being self-critical and understanding where he is as a driver and why he's and believing that driving on the rear of the car is the only thing that matters, even though there was a warning sign with that whole Yuki Tsunoda runoff thing in the stock cars. You know, if I'd been Liam Lawson's manager, or indeed Liam Lawson, after that runoff, I would have thought, I'm surprised Yuki was that good, because he's nothing like as oversteery as me, and I can hold a slide much better than Yuki. But isn't that what that's all about? Of course, it wasn't what that was all about. And that was the moment, I think, when Liam should have thought, what is Yuki doing in that car that I'm not doing? A little bit like Sebastian Vettel could have thought in his last year at Red Bull, what is Daniel doing in that car that I'm not doing? And nobody at Red Bull obviously put that thought in his head, and they just sailed on the basis that Liam's young, he's aggressive, he's competitive, he's bound to do a better job than, you know, old Sergio Perez. But they didn't look into all the technical details of Perez's driving. Very, very good still on traction. Pretty terrible when it comes to managing understeer. And compare it with Liam, which is not that good on traction, but really good on oversteer, power slides, and no feel for the front either. So, but all that was clear. That was clear last winter. It's not just now that it's becoming evident. If the Red Bull RB21 was as good as a McLaren, believe me, Liam Lawson would still be in the Red Bull, and he would have been pretty quick in both races. But the problem is it's not a good car, and Liam has never really had to drive a terrible car, I suspect. That's the real problem. Scroopy Nooper says, like the Police when they recorded Roxanne. Really? Roxanne, you don't have to put on the red line. Was it Sting said the first time he realized that he had half a chance as a musician was when he was cleaning windows in, I don't know where, Liverpool or somewhere. No, sorry. He was in a Doss House hotel somewhere in Liverpool, and there was a window cleaner outside singing Roxanne. That's when he knew he had a half a chance. No window cleaners here. Dexter, in case all the dog watchers and Dexter fans out there, he's just left. He's getting bored with the whole thing. He's heard all this before. Silas, imagine Yuki starts beating Max. Well, it could happen, of course. Max could have an electronic drama in the middle of Q2, and Yuki gets through to Q3 and Max doesn't get through to Q3. Could happen. It's motor racing. Press K1 to chat. Yeah, well, easy to say that. Can Yuki really drive the car as Max? No, of course he can't. He's not a Max Verstappen. He could be in the future if he continues his progress rate since sort of go over the last 3 years. But right now, his corner entries are, as I say, they're about on a par with Lando Norris's. And his touch is good. You know, that's always a great thing to have, is that soft, malleable touch. Then you can really do whatever you want if you work at it. And he's got a work ethic. He may not know how to work, but on this specific point, making the corners shorter, but he certainly has the potential to do that. Wow, so many questions. I'm so sorry about all the dramas and the blue shorts, which seem to have upset a lot of people. But I can assure you, white socks, not black. I'd never put black socks on unless I had long trousers. And the blue shoes, matching the blue shorts. So give me some credit. And the black top with the bluish Alpinestars logo. So it's all pretty unbelievably cool, really. As you say, like Sting. Yeah, right. Joanna says it was fun. Yeah, right. You may have thought it was fun, Joanna. Peter, what are your thoughts on the new tarmac in Suzuka? I haven't really thought about it. New tarmac in China seemed to throw a few spanners in the works, didn't it? With crosswind and everything else. So it'd probably make it more, as in China, it'll probably make it more difficult to get the tire window right. Probably a lot of, well, I don't know, you know, what to do on the out laps, preparation laps. So, yeah. I don't know. I wonder what tarmac it is, if it's the same as the Chinese one, where they use a standard one. I need to find out about that, actually. Because there was a time when, it was when the tire war with Goodyear, Bridgestone, Michelin, there was a big drama about who had the right, you know, who had control over the tarmac that could be used, because the tire companies all wanted to be a part of its constitution. Remember when they put Delu grip on Silverstone? It was a Dunlop product. There was no Dunlop. Dunlop weren't in racing at that point, but everybody was a bit nervous about if Dunlop were giving information to one of the other tire companies about it. JS, thanks for the insight as ever, Peter. Thank you very much. I've got tickets to Imola, last corner grandstand. Last corner grandstand, yeah. What corners would you recommend watching practice to compare drivers? Any that lend to short corners? Imola, quite difficult. If you can get it in practice, get to the outside of Acqua Minerale, breaking down there into Acqua Minerale, you'll probably see the difference between a Max and a Liam, or maybe a Lewis if he's still wide entries there. The best corner for me in Imola is actually the left-hander at the top of the hill after Tosa, which is, it's an odd corner, which they don't have many incidents there, which is a good thing, of course, but it's a quick corner. And to get it, it's a bit like the last corner at China. For some reason, those left-handers are quite difficult, about the same speed probably. And yeah, but difficult to watch that. And it's difficult to see it on TV as well. But that, to me, is the best part of Imola. But watching down at Acqua Minerale, the approach to Acqua Minerale should be good. And then top of the hill, the Variante Alta. Watch on the outside there. Always quite a lot of differences under braking there as well. Yeah, enjoy. It should be fun. Go to Bologna as well. Hang out in Bologna Square. Have a nice pasta there. And yeah, plenty of nice restaurants in Imola town for sure. Right. So getting back to more, I'm just releasing all these chat questions. It's like they build up and then you have to press a sort of arrow and then they explode, and there's a billion of them everywhere, which makes me feel a bit nervous because it's already 2:15. And from my point of view, I've been talking for 2.25 hours. And I think you'll find when the YouTube video comes out, that's exactly, it's going to be the whole thing. I think, I may be wrong, but I think that's what's going to happen. But I'm going to keep going for a bit because it's my way of saying, I'm sorry for all the technical dramas. I try to get it perfect every time, but you know, look what happens. But I have got to finish at the latest at 3 p.m. CET, which is 45 minutes from now. I haven't had anything to drink or eat either, you'll know. Sean says, I meant no respect when I said you were old. I'm almost 50, so I'm no pup. I just mean folks your age can't handle live streaming off YouTube. No disrespect. So no disrespect. I'm just laughing. I am old, probably. Well, I am. But that's good, isn't it? We can talk about a lot of things. How many people met Jim Clark and had a coffee with him? I had a Coke, actually. He had a coffee. Not many. And I can do it. I can say that. How many people knew Ronnie Peterson quite well? How many people have had the opportunity in their life to see a driver in Formula 3 that nobody rated, apart from one person, John Thornburn, and basically help him get all the way into Formula 1 to win a world championship? I'm so lucky to have been able to do that. And same with Carlos Reutemann, learned so much from Carlos. Panic Station at Red Bull, as distinct from Peter Windsor's YouTube channel. Good. Hello from Reigate. Daniel Agustin. Wow. I was born in Reigate. Apparently it was April, obviously, pretty soon from now, but it was very, very cold. And my mum, on the way to the hospital, there was black ice or something. It had a big moment going up the hill there, black ice. And then there was a big shunt when I was still very young. No seatbelts back in those days. And for some reason, she braked hard, or my dad braked hard, and I caught the mirror with my eyebrow. Lucky it was my eyebrow, not my eye. And I've still got the scar there. That's my story. And I'm sticking to it. Henry Williams says, Red Bull is following the path of what Benetton and Repsol Honda went through, building a bike car that is so extreme that only one driver can handle it. And once they leave, the team goes downhill. Well, it's not a bad observation, is it? I'm not saying Max can handle it, but I mean, he would say, well, it's not a very good car there. I'm only fourth, blown away by the McLarens and George Russell. So I think the reality is it's not a very good car at the moment. It doesn't have enough downforce and inherent downforce. And so it's not that they've designed this great car that only Max can drive. They've actually designed a bad car that even Max can drive it, but only to P4. So, Paul Anthony says, Peter, you're not old. As you're not old, neither is Lewis. Well, yeah. I didn't say he was old. I just said he was 40. There's a difference. What are your thoughts on why Red Bull only gave 2 races? We got that one. You've done all this. So I'm getting some repeats now. That's probably a good sign, is it? Oh, don't tell me it's frozen again. Another freeze going up on this chat. Clear, doesn't make any difference. Same things happened as before. I don't know whether this is a sign that the feed has stopped or what. Okay, getting some more now. Good. Michael Lawless, another super chat. Thank you, Michael. If you were managing PIA, how would you have had him prepare? Oh, sorry, Piastri. How would you have him prepare in the off season for this year? Also, what accounts for his change in driving style? Well, I would have said Lando Norris has very, very soft inputs and is very, very good in a race situation in terms of rhythm, and he's a good overtaker. He'll be as good a starter as anybody now, and he's got a very good racing brain. So Oscar, the only way you're going to beat him is if you do something different. You can do all of that probably, but the only way you're going to beat him is by doing something in addition to that. And the only thing that, the main thing you've got, which Lando's never shown, is this ability to create shorter corners and use less road effectively over the lap and give yourself a bigger sweet spot in which to operate the car at the transition point and not be so prone to the tires going off and variables like crosswind and changing track conditions. So really work on this business of creating short corners, first on slow corners, then medium speed, then fast corners. Do it in a sequential way. You were doing it pretty well at the beginning of last year, 24, and then you went away from that into a more Lando-esque style. But now's your chance over the winter to get back into that a little bit and just create something that Lando isn't doing, a bit like Charles Leclerc did over Carlos Sainz. That's what I would have said to him. And I don't think he did that. I think he just focused on what he was doing at the back end of last year, sort of Lando type corners, long, quite wide entry, braking in a straight line. But his inputs look pretty good now. They're certainly less spiky than last year. So probably that's what he's been working on, that Lando input just being a little bit softer with everything, which is giving him more opportunity to manage the tires. I think he would say, if he looked back at 24, the end of the year, that he's probably a bit more aggressive on tires than Lando, and that's what he would need to work on. And that's not bad. You know, that would have been the second part of what I would have said to him. And I'm only saying that because you asked me what I would have said. I would have got him to focus more on shorter corners for sure, which I don't think he's done. And I still think that if the car is pretty good and Lando's got a good feel from the set of tires, any set of tires at any given moment of the weekend, whether it be softs in qualifying or mediums in the race, whatever. If Lando's feeling right, I think it's going to be very difficult for Oscar to beat him. But if Lando's not, as we saw in China, absolutely for sure Oscar can beat him, because he does have that slightly more aggressive ability to drive through a problem. Probably the tires will go away, but he could use that to his advantage with a grid position or whatever. Slipstream Merchant says, Liam is a better driver than Yuki. He beat Yuki every time they were teammates in the junior Formula. Well, yeah, but let's talk about Formula One, and let's talk about that immediate runoff in the NASCAR thing, which was all about car control when Yuki beat him. And I think that was the transition point of Liam had reached a plateau of being what he is, quick, reflexy, oversteer driver, and Yuki being what he is, a naturally talented, fast driver who starts to improve quite systematically over the past 2 or 3 years, to the point where he's a much better driver now than he was in the Formula 3 days. Whereas I'm not sure Liam is. I think he's more experienced, but I think he's basically still the same driver. And I think that's the difference. And don't forget that in Formula 3, drivers like Nigel Mansell were completely overshadowed by drivers like Kenny Atchison or Stefan Johansson, also in marches. I'm talking drivers in similar cars, and certainly at the same team, Brett Riley. And yet it was Nigel who went on to win the World Championship. So Formula 3 can be quite misleading in terms of pointing in the direction of actually who's quicker. Always remember the Nigel Mansell thing. Craig Robertson says, in a nice numerical message, 1, hand shot first. 2, Checo was right. 3, Yuki should have been promoted before Liam. 4, I hope Lawson goes on a tear in the Toro Rosso, showing it was always the car. Okay, so we'll see. Let's see what happens. Robson de Paiva Leandro says, Peter, is it correct to say that in the Max era, Red Bull ended up giving in to making changes to the car so that he would be comfortable driving? In my opinion, and what I understand, absolutely not. Well, no, that's not strictly true. Of course, if Max says, if you give me a softer front, I'm going to be able to do more in turns 5, 9, and 12 on any given circuit. And they say to him, yeah, but that's going to mess up the rear through turns 2 and 7. He's going to say, oh, I can live with that. That's what I want. So in that sense, you could say, well, they're setting the car up to suit Max. It's not to suit Max. It's just that how good Max is. He knows what the engineers can give him and what he can live with if he settles for that compromise. That's a Michael Schumacher and Lewis Hamilton type talent. It's not, oh, this is designing the car around or setting the car up around Max. That's the epitome of the art, knowing what you can sacrifice from the engineers because you can make up for it in the car. Whereas most drivers say, oh, I've got understeer here, oversteer there, I need to get rid of the oversteer there, I need better traction, understeer there, and they go from one to the other, go around in a circle in the end. And that's the difference. So, yeah, of course, if you didn't work around Max, arguably the greatest driver of his time right now, or one of the best, certainly of this era, if you didn't work around what he wanted to do with the car, you'd be an idiot, wouldn't you? As an engineer, why wouldn't you? He's that good. You'd want the car to be maximized by Max Verstappen. That doesn't mean to say that in that car then, that really hurts the other driver. It just behoves the other driver to get the best from it the way Max is and to make himself as good as he possibly can be. Alwyn Kruger, love your content, but you really need someone to help you set up. Well, that's easy for you to say. I do have somebody, but they're not here. Live in Spain, mate. Everybody's out doing stuff. Yeah, they're not sitting in here in this studio. No, I know what you're saying. But anyway, it's quite fun. You live and learn. And I learned today, there is definitely a new thing on YouTube that I didn't press there, which is, they don't tell you, oh, next time you're going live, remember this. So let's have a look. Another super chat, I think. Let's have a look at this one. I know I've cut that one. That's the Christian Fittipaldi one. Thank you for that. It was a good question. Well, Scroopy Snooper's actually responding to Slipstream exactly what I just said. Just because he beat him regularly 6 years ago doesn't mean their development has been parallel. Yuki could have very much the tools to beat him now. Yeah, I think that's true. And everybody's going on about he beat him in Formula 3. I remember being at Monza when Yuki was in Formula 3 and I was so impressed with how he drove that I went up and took about 6 pictures of him. I took 6 pictures because I couldn't believe that's who he was. He looked like he was 12 years old. I thought, no, it can't be him. It must be somebody else. I better take these pictures just in case. And then oh, no, he's talking to him. It is Yuki. And I did more pictures of him. And I remember that I did that because he was so good that day. I think he won, I don't know, it was a feature race, I think. Might have been a sprint, I don't know. But he definitely was very good in Formula 3. I'll tell you who else was good was Fukuzumi. And he's back in Super Formula doing quite well now, I think. Simon Duckworth. Hi, Peter. I remember you talked about Renault in Formula 1, and it made me wonder why Citroën never went into Formula 1 in the late 50s, 60s, early 70s, given they were way ahead of their time with their road car development. Yeah. I was thinking about Citroën yesterday, actually, giving them full marks for still being involved in rallying, WRC2, and having a pretty good car too. And they are a good company. You watch the old Maigres and those lovely Citroëns with the forward opening doors and the amazing suspension. The Citroën Maserati was a great car. Mike Hale would have one. Sadly, that's where he lost his life in one of those. Some idiotic truck driver doing a U-turn on the dual carriageway. Citroën, but wasn't the problem that the French industry was all mixed up at that point? Renault, Peugeot, Citroën and everything, and they couldn't all do Formula 1. And Citroën, to their credit, went off and did rallying. I think that's what it was, or not? 50s, 60s, early 70s, yeah. Well, I mean, Renault were fueled. We're talking about Renault coming into Formula One with their own team in 77. They were fueled by Amedeo Gordini and everything he'd been doing in Formula One in the 50s and 60s. And Renault and Gordini had a really good partnership. And Alpine too, actually, for that matter. So there was a lot of racing blood at Renault. And when Alpine and Renault developed a really nice 2-litre V6 Formula 2, it was a small step to make that a 1.5-litre turbo to go Formula 1. So it all came from that sort of burning French thing. And Renault were very involved in Formula 3. Of course, they won the European Championship with Alain Prost in their Formula 3, as were, and therefore they were tied up with Elf. So that, yeah, there was a lot going on, where Citroën was sort of going their other way, and they ended up in rallying. Good. I have a lot of time for companies that show their merit on the World Rally stage as distinct from the Formula 1 stage. As I mentioned, I think in the last live stream, you know, what Mercedes ever done in rallying? Bowringer and that huge Merc thrashing around, but nothing since then. Susie Perry, do you think Lando and Oscar are going to end up having a big fallout this season? Well, they're both very nice guys, aren't they? Oscar seems to be very, very laconic, very Australian, very relaxed. But let's assume they're equal on points going into the Qatar Grand Prix, and they run into one another at the first corner, and then neither of them finish the race. Will they be mates after that? I don't think they're mates now. I think they're probably both bright enough to know, yeah, we'll be everything Zach wants us to be. And Oscar's a funny bloke, or Oscar talking, Lando's a good guy. But are they mates? Are they going to have, you know, pasta together, and do they chill out? I don't think they probably. I'd be surprised if they do, to be honest. So if you're not mates, you can easily fall out, can't you? I mean, the reality is you can't be friends with the guy you're trying to beat more than anybody else on the planet Earth. And that is the guy in the other car, the team in which you drive. So if you are friends with him, there's something wrong, really. And so, yeah, they've probably fallen out already in that sense, haven't they? In the sense that they can't be mates because they're competitors with one another. But they haven't fallen out. But if they did fall out, what would it mean? They'd still be turning up for work every day. They'd still be driving. They'd still be doing what they do. There'd be no difference. It's just they wouldn't be, well, they're probably still even posing for pictures together. They'd be doing what they had to do with the sponsors. So it wouldn't make any difference at all, really. Zach would be the one with the, you know, the dramas if that happened. Because he loves Lando. He's known him since I don't know how, because he was 3 or something. And Oscar's his man. So, you know, he chose him to replace Daniel. One Aussie to replace another. It was a big thing to do. So he's going to love it if Oscar's successful as well. So it's a big problem for Zach in a way. Carlos Marquez, you agree that no one will be as good as Max on the second car because they're going, well, we've done that one. They don't make it around Max. He just maximizes the car. Scrippy Numbers, Peter, in your history of following Formula One, who's the driver that learnt and evolved the most, given perhaps a dearth of natural initial talent? Well, I mean, dearth of natural talent is very harsh on any Grand Prix driver, because even Willie Maires, or I say even, I mean Willie Maires never won a Grand Prix, but massive natural talent. And a lot of natural talents, sadly, never made it beyond year one because of how dangerous racing was. So anyway, everybody's talented in Formula One. So there's no dearth of natural talent in anybody that's been successful in Formula One. What you can say is that some drivers have progressed and learnt more than others. I would say Denny Hulme is a good example of a driver who, of course, he had a massive natural talent. Liam Lawson type talent for oversteer. But he then harnessed that. And if you look at the Denny of 67 at Monaco, where he's sideways at every hairpin, cross-armed like this, and then you compare that with the Denny of 74 in the McLaren, when he's got 4 different compounds on 4 different all four corners of the car, and he's incredibly sensitive, and you never see him out of line, and he's super quick. Two different drivers. I mean, that's how much Denny Hulme improved. So I'd say, you know, he's a good example of one. Let's think of some more obvious reasons. I'd say Nico Rosberg, actually. Nico improved a lot from the Williams days to, say, year 2, year 3 at Mercedes. He made it his mission to understand how to maximize all the gadgets and electronics that were around the driver now, and to make the most of that, and to calmly put it together, and to put together a very good work regime back at the factory, and manifest itself in results. And he did that. And he was a much better driver at the end of his career than he was in the Williams days, in my opinion, even though he had a lot of natural talent back then. Whereas his dad, I don't think, progressed that much. I think he was the same driver that won the Daily Express trophy in the Theodore as he was when he was driving the factory McLaren. I don't think he was much different, whereas Nico did progress a lot. So it's, of course, it's a doable thing, but you've got to be self-critical. You've got to be analytical. You've got to have the brain to understand where you can improve. And engineers normally aren't going to help you there. They're just going to say, oh, well, you're braking later than Lando, so there's nothing you can do there. You're a great braker, and you're getting the power on sooner than Lando. Nothing you can do there. You know, if it was Oscar, for example, and so they get a bit confused by it all. But if you stay away from the telemetry and you actually watch what's going on the track, and you feel the car as it is in terms of your senses and your gut feeling, then you can start to develop in a number of areas. And that's very important. And I don't know whether this show is being repeated or not, or the stuff I went out is going out, but I would make the point that another driver that I think who's benefited, well, a driver who's really good this year so far is Lance Stroll. He drove well in Melbourne, he drove well in China. A lot of people don't like to admit that, but he did. And a lot of the credit there should go to the work ethic that he has and had with Rob Wilson, and how self-critical he's been, and how open-minded he's been to learn from Rob. And his dad won't like me saying that, but I'm saying it anyway, because I want Rob to get the credit, and Lance Stroll to get the credit for going to Rob and making it work. So it is doable. And Lance is by no means home and dry in terms of being a very fast, consistently quick racing driver, but everyone said in Australia, oh, well, he's good in the wet. Well, then China came along, he did a pretty good job there too. So he's driving quite well, and he's used his brain well over the winter. He's an example of a driver, I think, who's progressed at least in a commensurate way with his level of talent. And maybe Rob's got more out of him than most drivers of his talent level would have done. Felipe Bedoya, how can a driver like Yuki put on the work needed to drive the difficult Red Bull if they have little real practice, knowing the sim will never mimic 100% the characteristics of the Red Bull? Well, I think more to the point, the sim will never mimic 100% the characteristics of the driver. That's the point I'm making, between the digits of the driver's inputs. As I said, I hope, you know, if this wasn't in the early part, it's like two maestros, piano forte maestros, who are both world acclaimed, but one to the aficionados is slightly better than the other, and they all play the same notes, but one of them just plays the notes slightly differently, which makes the experts say, ah, yes, but he is the best of them all. And that's the difference between a Max and a Yuki and everybody else. It's the way he presses the buttons. He uses the same notes, but he does everything slightly differently. It's all soft, and it's beautifully, everything Max does is in harmony with the dynamic rates of the car. He's never asking the car to do something that it isn't ready to do, whereas a Liam is often asking the car to do something against the grain of the force. And I think Yuki's somewhere between the two. So what the question is, how can a driver like Yuki put on the work needed to drive the difficult Red Bull? Well, because he has a slightly softer touch than Liam, he is going to be able to sort of feel a little bit more what the Red Bull is wanting him to do and get the best from that. Now, he's not going to do that as well as Max, because Max is going to say, well, it's understeering here, but if I make sure I come out of the brakes at this rate and put the steering on there, I can just about get on top of the understeer and still keep the traction that I've got. You know, and he's not saying that in his head, he's just feeling that. It's gut instinct. And Yuki's somewhere near that, but not in that zone, definitely not. But he's more able to do that than Liam. That's when I say, you know, it's all very well to say Liam's very talented and a big oversteery, reflexy driver, but that's great if the car has phenomenal balance and grip level front and rear. But if it doesn't, what else has he got? What other tools does he have to get the best from the car? Not many. Whereas Yuki's got a few more tools in his toolbox. Paul Snowden said, it's time Red Bull were kicked out. The way they treat their drivers is disgusting. Well, but why say that now? I can think of about 10 young drivers that have been sacked from Formula 3. What about Ammermuller for a start? What about Friesacker? You know, there's so many talented guys. But everybody just accepts it and they go along with it because Max is there. And I've always said, you know, the biggest problem with the Red Bull Young Driver Academy is that they don't use Rob Wilson's system and or somebody like Rob. And most of the Red Bull drivers have no concept of short corners or the difference in touch between a Max and a Liam, or indeed the difference between Sergio Perez and Max and the way they drive with understeer. None of them. And that's the problem with the system. It's one thing just to put them in and just expect the best from them. It's another to understand what the talent is of every driver. And remember, every driver is different. Every driver is different. Every driver has a fingerprint. And some drivers are going to be more able to go into this direction, some like that. Some are born straight line, late turn in, perfection drivers. Ayrton Senna, very good example. There's no way you could ever have taught Ayrton Senna to use short corners. Equally, you could never have taught Alan Prost to use long corners, to do what Ayrton does. But you got the best from both there. I personally think a very, very good short corner driver will always beat a very, very good long corner driver because there's more room for error in a short corner driver. He can handle the variables. He's got a bigger palette in which to handle the variables. But every driver's different. And I don't think the Red Bull Academy takes it into account. It's just shouting and screaming down the phone every time they make a mistake, or occasionally kissing him on the cheek if they go well. Michael Lawless. Peter was born during oversteer. What does that mean? Was I born in the era when oversteer was still quick? Yeah, well, I think I was, yeah. Ty Sondero. Question, without Max, where would Red Bull be? 8th team on the grid? Well, yeah, you're right. You can say that about a lot of teams in recent times, though. If you, oh, wow, good job, he's in the car, because if he wasn't, imagine what everyone would think. Yeah, and Max is there, but he's had some great years with Red Bull. So everybody's very down on Red Bull at the moment, and I've never been, massive groupie in terms of going up to the factory at weekends and trying to get autographs. But at the same time, I respect them for everything they've done as a race team and achieved. And no team is ever going to be winning races all the time. As we saw, you're talking to, I'm a guy that was at Williams when we went from Honda turbos to Judds overnight. And what did everybody expect we were going to do on the Judd engine? Nothing against John Judd, great guy, great engineer. But sadly, didn't have, the backing and the wherewithal of Honda. So everything changes all the time. Wow, so many questions. Ain't going to get through them all, I'm afraid, but I'm going to do my best. Francesca02 says, Lawson might actually be happy about this. It wasn't going to get any better, but now he can go to the Bulls, perform well, maybe beat Yuki and set himself up for the future. Yeah, I still think that's right. And I still think he can go well, but he needs to, instead of patching over what has shown up in his driving style as a shortcoming, instead of just forgetting about that and getting back to the Racing Bulls and going quite well and maybe out qualifying and out racing Isaac, which he should do given his experience, he should be working really hard on his shortcomings and learning from the mistakes made by Sebastian Vettel and Daniel Ricciardo when they and Fernando Alonso when they didn't work on their obvious shortcomings, as shown up by Daniel in the case of Vettel, Max in the case of Daniel, and Lewis Hamilton in the case of Fernando Alonso. And we've seen 3 times now drivers just put their head in the sand and went somewhere else. Liam needs to say, wow, I don't want to do that. I need to work on what I'm not doing very well. And I need to understand this. So, Scroopy Noopers. Would you consider a commentary gig at Sky Sports Formula 1 if it was offered to you? How well would you get on with Martin Brundle? Maybe, yeah, I would. Well, the travel's a bit of a drama, isn't it? It probably clashes with a few rallies, isn't it? I'm going to be doing Acropolis, Estonia, Finland, maybe Portugal this year. So, yeah, got a lot of rallies to go to, all for fun, of course. And no, I'm being facetious. Yeah, I don't know how to answer that really. Depends on the conditions. How do you get on with Martin Brundle? Well, my claim to fame is that, when was this? 1990, I reckon it was about 1997, 8 maybe. Martin rang me, and I've got a long history with Martin. We got very good friends for a long time, and his brother Robin. I used to race with Robin in Metros, and then Martin, I got to know Martin very well in Formula 3, and when he was doing the BMW County Saloon Championship, same year as Nigel, and that famous race at Silverstone when they were wheel to wheel for the whole race, sorry, door handle to door handle, which Martin won. I'd always been a Martin fan, very soft touch, lovely driver, short corners, everything you needed to be quick. And when I was, my first attempt to do a Formula 1 team was when Bernie invited me with the backing of Walter Brunn to buy the Brabham team, and then Brunn disappeared with all the money, and I was left high and dry, and Bernie then sold it all to, well, no, then that Lutzi, that was that guy called Lutzi, arrived, terrible. Anyway, I was in court for about a year trying to sort all that out. But for the short period of time I was actually running the team with Brunn's money, my driver was Martin Brundle, because he wasn't in Formula 1. And I really rated him, always had. And I sat down with Nick Britton, had lunch with him, nice restaurant in Sloane Square, and we did the deal. And my deal for Martin was a lot of points money, a lot of bonus money in terms of championship positions. Not a mega retainer, but really wanted him. And I remember going back to Bernie that afternoon saying, well, I've done the Martin Brundle deal. He said, who? I said, Martin Brundle, Martin Brundle is the worst decision in the history of Brabham. I remember him saying. Said the same thing about Damon Hill, actually. And anyway, going back to the point, so I've always liked Martin, always got on well with him. And yeah, I'd love to do something with Martin. Good bloke. Really good guy. OBE now, I think, isn't he? Or MP or Sir, something. Yeah, congratulations to Martin. Well deserved. Very fast racing driver. I've got one of his helmets, actually, from when he did Le Mans in the Jag, which I bought in auction once, signed by Martin. Riley 57 says, you've got to assume that they, Red Bull, think Yuki's going to perform well enough, at least to give them data going forward, which they desperately need. Well, they got all the data from Max. They don't desperately need the data. They desperately need points from the other car for the Constructors' Championship. That's what they need. Let's call a spade a spade. The data, they know the data. They don't have enough downforce, and therefore they're unkind to their tyres. They just need more downforce. Don't need any more data from that. Plus cash injection from Honda? Really? I doubt that. I really doubt that. Maybe a little bit, but bear in mind Honda are leaving to go to Aston Martin. I can't imagine there's going to be a lot of money there. That's a thought. I hadn't thought of that, but I think they're just doing it because he's done a very good job in the last 12 months in that car, in the Racing Bulls car, and he's going to do a better job than Liam for the better half this year. James Harper, Peter, if Hamilton beats Leclerc over a season at 40, would that be one of the best achievements in Formula One history? When you say beat over a season, you mean score more points, win more races, out-qualify him? Depends what you mean by that. 40? Don't think so, really. I mean, Giuseppe Farina was definitely older than Juan Manuel Fangio in 1950, and Fangio won the championship in 51, blew him away. So always have to remember that. And just going back, actually, I don't know how many have seen the beginning of the show when I was on a rant about how F1 are now spelling Jim Clark's name with an E. I noticed also the list of driver champions, they had, in their pedantic way of wanting to have David Hobbs and Jochen Mass in their McLaren 74 Constructors' Championship, they have G. Farina, when in fact everybody knew him as Nino Farina, but that was actually his correct name, Giuseppe. But then again, when it comes to Rosberg, they have Keke Rosberg when it's Kaya Rosberg was his real name. So they're going to have Christian names or not? Seems to be inconsistency in all that. Anyway, Sarah, it's interesting that everything is focused on Liam and Yuki at the moment, when there's a good chance neither of them will even be in the team next year, and with Lindblad in the Honda ending. Well, there you go. I've been mentioning Lindblad. Lindblad, who's very good. And somebody said, who is the driver? I think he would be the reserve driver now, wouldn't he? And so you're saying Honda ending, that's the end for Yuki. But don't forget, we got Toyota sponsoring. The reason I'm a bit quizzical about that previous question, where we're talking about, oh, not that one, this one, the Honda cash injection, was because we've got Toyota putting money into Haas now with a Ferrari engine. So is it conceivable that Red Bull with a Ford engine might get Honda money to run Tsunoda? Anything's possible these days, I suppose. Tristan Cortez, hi Peter, not Formula One related, but did you see the NASCAR tribute livery from the Wood brothers commemorating Jim Clark's 65 Indy 500? When I didn't know, but thank you for pointing that out. What a wonderful thing. The Wood brothers, of course, were instrumental in that win. Well, as it turned out, they didn't need to be instrumental, but what happened was Colin Chapman thought, wow, these NASCAR guys do a very good job. Who's the best NASCAR refueling team? We'll get them on the car for next year. 65. He noticed that in 64. So the Wood brothers trained with Lotus for a long time to do a really, really slick fuel stop for Jimmy in the 65 Indy 500. But of course, Jimmy won that race primarily because he only made one pit stop to everybody else's two. So the Wood brothers actually didn't have a massively high bar to climb, but it was wonderful to see them. And they were indeed part of that team, as were Alan Moffat, who went on to be a multi-Australian touring car champion, great guy, and guys like David Lazenby, who was at Lotus at the time, went on to start the Hawk Racing team, Hawk Racing Car Company, and built great cars for a long time. So, yeah, a lot of key people in that 65 Indy Lotus team, but particularly the Wood brothers. What a nice thing. Of course, the great thing about the Wood brothers and that fuel stop in the Indy 500 was that the fuel hose was in the color of a tiger's tail, because Jimmy was using Enco fuel. It was Esso, actually, as we know, but Enco in America. And it was all in the tiger, put a tiger in your tank. And so it was a tiger tank fuel hose going out to the car. Brilliant. Peter, what are your thoughts on Max Verstappen matching and at times even beating McLaren's pace on the hard tyres towards the end of the Chinese Grand Prix? He was quick at the back end of the British Grand Prix when he was unbelievably slow in the first half. Remember that? That's a typical thing when a car is very, very sensitive to tyre deg and tyre temperatures and it's difficult to drive. You suddenly find a sweet spot and you go well. But also see that in the context that McLaren were cruising at that point. So we shouldn't be, I know Red Bull would like to say that, but for sure Lando and Oscar, well, for sure Oscar, who was dictating the pace, was, I would say, second off his best, and Lando, the same. Oh, I mean, Lando was nursing it, wasn't he? So you shouldn't really say that, but it doesn't mean that much, really. It just shows how inconsistent the Red Bull is, and that's one of the reasons it's not a quick car at the moment. I wonder if teams have people like Peter advising them. Am I allowed to show my phone again? Somebody was knocking my phone, I think. I've got a few interesting names in the old WhatsApp there. So, yeah. Bit of messaging going on, but not a lot. As I say, if somebody like Liam actually spent, even if Rob wasn't physically in the car with him doing stuff, if he just spent 3 days in a row tapping Rob's brain, Liam Lawson would definitely improve, for sure. But then again, you're going to have managers and Liam himself and other people say, well, what could some old bloke like Rob, who's not very well anyway, who drinks too much coffee and, plays in a rock band, what would he possibly be able to tell Liam Lawson superstar? That's what would happen. And you say, well, it hasn't actually hurt Lance Stroll. Yeah, well, it's Lance Stroll, isn't it? And so it goes on. That is the way of the world. I can think of plenty of people in massive positions of power who don't listen to intelligent advice. So, burn rubber. Why don't more drivers drive short corners? Because they don't know about it. and they don't understand what they're all about. They've never been taught. And because motor racing is a sport where if things aren't going right, there are a million different things to blame. In karting, it can be haven't done enough testing, can be the ratios, can be the tires, can be the engine, can be a million things. And once you get into Formula 4, Formula 3, Formula 2, it's going to be budget, testing, setup, team, race engineer, this wasn't right, that wasn't right. And then you get to Formula 1, you got so much telemetry, you can always blame, oh, well, it's because of the diff there. They never get around to saying, oh, actually, it could be me. They never do that. From karting onwards, it's never them. And that's why. And it shows, we talked after, a few of you pointed out, after the Bahrain test, when they were absolutely astonished. Who was it? Actually, it was Liam Lawson, I think, oddly enough, was out on track watching. And I said, wow, I hope he's watching Max through turn 9, 10. But if he didn't benefit it from him, did he? And George was out there, I think, but that's about it, scratching at the surface just to see any drivers out there, really. George had a camera which suggests he was looking more at the cars than actually what the drivers were doing. I just think most racing drivers, because they're racing drivers, think that they've got nothing to learn and it's got to be the car if they're not quick. And I think when you go into a position where quite obviously you have got something to learn because suddenly you're up against Max Verstappen in a difficult car, you're so shocked, you don't know how to react. And I think that's where Liam has collapsed. I mean, he's not driving as well now as he will drive again back in the Racing Bulls. But I think with Yuki, it's going to be slightly different because he's done enough now and he's improved enough now and learnt enough over the last 3 years against the teammates he's had to know that when he goes to Red Bull, it's a real opportunity to learn from Max and the ego won't get in the way. I think that's the case with Yuki. I'm not sure Red Bull will be thinking that way, but I think that's how he will handle it. Tysondra says, going back to the if Lewis beats Leclerc, it depends on his ability to outscore. In other words, score more points in the race. If it is just what can happen, if he beats Charles, say, 100, 150 points, that would be spectacular. Yeah. If he beats him by 50 points, assuming Charles has no plague of engine blow-ups or penalties and all that stuff from engine penalties, that would be spectacular. But again, to reiterate, Jack Brabham won the World Championship at age 40, his third World Championship at age 40, beating Denny Hulme, a young charger. And Fangio, a different thing in terms of numbers of age, because Fangio had to sit out World War II, don't forget. But, as a young guy in Formula One, let's put it that way, a new guy in Formula One, beat the establishment in his second year to win his first World Championship. And Sterling Moss it took a few years to get the right drive, but I mean, he was pretty impressive, as was Mike Hawthorne, Jim Clark, John Surtees. I mean, Surtees, 60 British Grand Prix, amazingly quick. Just jumped from a motorbike into a factory Lotus 18. Quick, straight away. Scroopy Noopers, because short corners aren't a natural instinct. No, they're not. Short corners are not a natural instinct. They are for drivers that are at the top of their peak, like Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc. They just drive that way instinctively, yes. But in order to drive that well, you have to have an incredibly wide scope of talent in a racing car. Not only all the things that a Liam Lawson has or a Carlos Sainz has, car control, balance, all these things, feels, reflexes, peripheral vision, but you also have the ability to put all that together in a very soft, harmonic way which is completely in concert with the dynamic forces of the car at any given millisecond. And then having got that, then probably it feels very natural for them to start wanting to get into the corner a bit earlier and not worry about minimum speed, but just get the car rotated at exactly the right rate and angle to get a longer straight on exit. That probably feels very natural to them. Having said that, if you've got a driver who's got this very wide talent and does have very soft touches, like Lando Norris, absolutely for sure, Lando could learn quite quickly how to drive, how to shorten his corners. You'd need to do it in a very specific way, which I won't go into here, and Rob Wilson would certainly play a part in that, but he could definitely do it. He would say, it doesn't feel right, doesn't feel natural to me. It's a bit like any top pro golfer, even if he's just won the last tournament, will go to the range on a Monday with his swing coach, and the swing coach will say, you're 2.5 degrees out of line on the backswing, what's going on? And the guy will say, and then he'll say, oh, okay. And you'll put it 2.5 degrees further out, and you say, that feels terrible. And the coach will say, no, but it's right. Just do 3 of those and it'll feel natural. He does 3, and oh yeah, wow, amazing. I could have won by even more shots. That happens all the time. It happens in your driving as well. And it may not feel comfortable for a lap or two, but very quickly it will. And that's why I keep going back to Oscar. That's the one area where I think he does have a feel and the talent base in order to beat Lando, because he's shown that already. Whereas Lando's never shown that inclination to go to short corners. He has a little bit, but not much. He just has his own way of driving, and it serves him well. And he probably thinks, well, in this of all years, my best chance ever to win a championship, I'm not going to change anything. It's probably where we're at. And there's so much info out there, so much advice from the engineers, so much stuff that they just go to the gym instead, lift weights, stretch in neck muscles. And they feel then that they're improving themselves as a driver, but they're not. They're improving their fitness, obviously, but they're not actually improving themselves as a driver. Paul Anthony Nelson says in reply to Saavedra, hope to see Alex Palou get a chance to campaign Formula One. Colton is fast, but can he work with Andretti? Needs an opportunity that doesn't do his head in. Well, I don't know about that with Andretti and Colton Herta. I would imagine, knowing Brian Herta, that Colton's got a pretty good head if you actually treat him, intelligently, as I'm sure Andretti would. And it'd be lovely to see Alex Palou in that car, wouldn't it? Alex Palou and Fred Vesti, what a combination that would be. 2 very, very good drivers. And it's a good thing it's 26, because you can say, oh, well, no experience really between the two of them. Well, if it's a new clean sheet of paper for everybody in 26, isn't it? A lot of it's going to be managing the power units. Sammy K02, Max to Merch is going to have to be pretty near the last one. I know George is performing very well right now, but I think Toto would happily drop him for Max. If they don't extend George beyond 25 by summer, got to assume they're holding out for Max. Well, yeah, I think if it's the end of, if the Red Bull Ford in 26 is not a good car, and Toto's sitting down with Max and saying, okay, Max, here's $1 billion, 10-year contract, and actually, 5-year contract, 10 billion, 1 billion. And, we want you in the team. Mercedes, it's you. You're going to be the next Fangio. He says, okay, fine. I just don't want George in the other car. Well, Toto's going to say, okay, deal done. Because he's got Kimi in the other car. Doesn't worry him too much, isn't he? I would imagine. Equally, if Max says, no, I'm going to drive for Aston, he's going to say, well, I've got George and Kimi, not bad. So there we go. Amy Newland, if you haven't already discussed, what are the challenges for Sainz? Well, Carlos Sainz, huge challenges. Alex Albon is really quick, always has been, always will be. Very soft inputs, softer than Carlos's. Long corners like Carlos. He drives like Carlos, really, just a bit softer. And his inputs. Carlos, total lack of testing, culture shock, car shock, engineer shock, everything shock. Going to Williams from Ferrari, very difficult. If he'd had an entire winter of testing, getting to know all these people, all these guys, the car, everything else, and in the old days, being at Carlami for a week, I think you'd see a different Carlos Sainz. But it's, he's showing how difficult it is, and that's why Liam Lawson's struggling, because they're both long corner, oversteery drivers. And if you throw a car that requires quite a lot of sensitivity, particularly massaging in the front, then they're going to struggle with no testing. And that's what's going on. So it's difficult for Carlos. Of course, he's quick, but he doesn't look the beautifully smooth, polished Carlos that we saw back end of most of 2024, sadly, which was inevitable. I still think it would be better for him to have gone to Sauber, because there'll be no pressure on him now, as we can see from Nico Hülkenberg and Bortoleto, that, you know, the car's obviously not very good, and that's just what I expected. You know, you don't want a lot of pressure if you're going to be in that year, but then they, at least everybody at Sauber can look forward to, with Jonathan Wheatley there, they can look forward to it being Audi from 26 onwards, not bad, and they might have a half reasonable engine, who knows, you know, take them a while probably, but at least he's with Audi and it's growing and it's organic. And this whole Williams thing, where he just goes there and all of a sudden he's got Alex Albon to beat, as I predicted, would be very uncomfortable for Carlos. Very uncomfortable. Hi, Peter. Do teams have coaches to improve driver skills? Yeah, they do. They're called race engineers. And that's why so many drivers these days, I think, are lost, because all they're listening to is race engineers who are basically only looking at telemetry. When was the last time we saw a race engineer out on the circuit actually watching the drivers and looking at what they do? Don't recall it. And so, yeah, that they've replaced the Rob Wilsons of this world. Great shame. Great shame. But everybody in Formula One, and I'm excluding here the sort of completely purely natural, brilliant talents like Max, Charles, Lewis, and maybe George, Lando, Oscar probably, you know, all these really good guys at the top who are really going well at the moment. If you look at the sort of run-of-the-mill drivers, they're all thinking, got nothing to learn from a coach. All my improvement's going to come from studying telemetry and doing a better job with my engineer. That's how they all think. They've all been thinking that way since karting, so there's no reason for them not to think that way. It's such a shame. Jerry C. Wait, so is the switch official? Yeah, the press release came out today about Yuki and Liam in Racing Bulls for the rest of the year. No quotes from the drivers, interestingly enough, on this occasion. Red Bull love quotes normally. But lots of stuff about, you know, it's brilliant that we have these two teams and we're just giving the drivers an opportunity to try different things, blah, blah, blah. Right. Now, trying to get back to Raj said something about why I'm not keeping everybody waiting. I hate keeping people waiting, and I'm very punctual. I started at midday on the dot, as far as I'm concerned, but I'm very sorry for those that got messed around. You agree that no one will be as good as Max on the second car because the car is made around Max? No, I won't agree with that. I agree with nobody will be as good as Max in the second car because they're not as good as Max. That's the difference. And of course, the car, as I say, has evolved around Max because he's as good as he is. And if he wants a softer rear, they're going to give him a softer rear because they know that he's going to compensate for that with some other aspect of his driving. But if a lesser driver comes along and says they want a softer rear, they're going to think, well, what's he going to do when he's got a problem with the front? We're not sure he can compensate for that. But they know with Max, he knows what he's doing. That's the difference. And it's not because the car is made around Max. It's because they set the car up according to the way they know Max can drive it. Yeah, okay, we're talking a lot about Max and Liam. Very little talk about McLaren, isn't it? You would imagine that McLaren would be pretty much on everybody's mind, but are they bored by McLaren winning? Are they bored by the fight between Lando and Oscar? Because in reality, two guys in the same team who are both good, racing one another wheel to wheel, is the best form of motor racing you can possibly have. Can't be any closer than that. Kevin, Peter, what are the all-time best corners to make a pass into or an exit in Formula One? Well, one of the great corners, actually, you're going to see this weekend, which is turn 1 into Suzuka. And there is a pass that can be made there on the outside, as we've seen many drivers. Ross Cheever, particularly in Super Formula, was unbelievable there. But many other drivers have emulated. Some of them ended up in the boonies, but it's a great place to do a pass on the outside there into one. It's one of the most spectacular passes you can make in Formula One. We have quite a lot of passing on the outside on slow corners these days because of the regulations. You know, you have to give the guy room and all that. But on the outside of turn 1, Suzuka, that's a serious corner. And so watch for it this weekend. Yep, Dana Squire says, why nobody talks about Kimi Antonelli? Great start. I have talked about him. And I mentioned him today already, big time. He's done very well. And he gives the lie to this whole thing of, well, Liam hasn't any much testing and it's difficult. Kimi has just got in the car and done a very good job. So there you go. Paul Anthony says, Nelson, bedtime down under. She'll tune in tomorrow. Hope it's a complete video to watch tomorrow. Anyway, sleep well. Luke H. Did you find it odd that Hamilton and his engineer were still coming to terms with comms requirements over the last 2 races? Wouldn't they have spent time bedding this down before the season started? Absolutely. And I put that at the floor of Freddie Vasseur, getting the best from the engineers, the best from the relationship with the engineers on the radio. Definitely should have been sorted out long before the first race. I don't understand that. No excuse for that. That's just bad management. Those are things in the control of the team long before the car turns a wheel. There's no excuse for that. It should have been sorted out back at Fiorano. Certainly the Barcelona test, let alone Bahrain. Jahash, we don't have a lot of chance of comparing Formula One drivers in equal cars, yeah? Going to my point about the 2 McLaren drivers this year. That's why drivers shouldn't cheat and underestimate those fun promotion events when they compete in a go-kart or ice or boats. And exactly the point I've been making about that promotion event Red Bull did with Yuki and Liam Lawson. When Yuki beat Lawson in an environment in which Lawson, if he's the mega superstar, oversteer, reflexy driver that he is, should have beaten Yuki. Neither of them had been to a dirt oval before. Neither of them had driven a 600-700 horsepower stock car before. And Yuki beat Liam. And I made that point at the time, even to the point of showing video of it. Nobody listened. But to me, that was significant. Okay. I'm going to have to wind it up now, guys, because I'm getting very dry in the throat, etc. Okay. So this is the last one. It's quite an interesting one. Probably a bit too complicated for my brain, but it says, M. Ken, hey Peter, the YouTuber Lower Lap Time made a video analyzing your definition of short corners and Rob Wilson's definition. The conclusion was that yours is just a tight line. What is your response to that? Would you call Rob Wilson's definition wrong? For me, a short corner is extending the straights and turning the car in a sharp radius. Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think, I've never imagined, whenever I've talked to Rob about short corners or he's talked to me about short corners, I've always understood exactly what he meant, and it's exactly what I understand. So if this website says we've got 2 different explanations, then that's my fault for not doing a better job of explaining what a short corner is. And I'll continue to do that. But you're absolutely right. It's basically enabling you to extend the straight into the rotation point, well past the turn-in point of a guy taking a wide turn-in, and to have and to extend the straight on exit as well, and not to be concerned with a low minimum speed. And the key to it all is the feel for managing the understeer, the feel for the right moment and rate of rotation mid-corner, or the rotation point, and for getting the car on exactly the line you need, the piece of road you want for the exit, which is exactly what Rob says. So I'm flattered that these people have even done a definition, but if I'm wrong, if they think my definition is different from Rob's, then that's my fault, not Rob's, because it's complicated in a way, it's very simple in another way. And it all starts actually from understanding the parameters of the friction circle, as first brought to everyone's notice by Mark Donoghue, and then subsequently by Carl Kempf, who's now a fellow at Intel. But when Kempf was seconded to Goodyear in his early days, he brought the friction circle to light, to the point where Harvey Postlethwaite designed the Heska 308C around Carl's ideas and concepts. It wasn't a very good car because for different reasons, the chassis stiffness reasons, but all you're doing with short corners effectively is maximizing the tire's performance within the friction circle. That's actually what's happening. And Carl Kempf pointed that out in 1975. There's nothing new here. Finally, Jeffrey B. Hi, Peter. We lost Eddie last year. Can you share any good stories of EJ? Well, as most of them involve expletives, I probably can't share them here. But Eddie, he just never stopped laughing and smiling with Eddie. I just had so many laughs with Eddie. you know, when he did his charity bike ride, I remember he was just going on and on about the dust, enough that it even stopped me talking. He said, I don't know. He was a great racer in many ways. Pretty good Formula 3 driver with the Marlboro money. I don't know how he got that Marlboro money, but he did. In his March, and a contemporary of Nigel's. And yeah, I think, you know, he was, I suppose he and I always had quite a lot of banter about Nigel, because he, like everybody else, he didn't really rate Nigel that highly in Formula 3. But when Nigel started to go well, it was, oh, Peter, what's going on with Nigel? What have you done? Things like that. You know, it's just banter with Eddie, really. I can't really think of any stories as such. I suppose the one that, you know, the emotional one was when he was talking about Imola 94 and flying back, and there was just first time in his life he just ever didn't hear a sound on the aircraft. There was just nobody speaking at all. That was Eddie at his most eloquent best, really. Lovely guy. And Marie, his wife, his kids, one of whom worked for Jordan for quite a long time. No, well, not Jordan, one of the other teams anyway. I can't remember which one. Jaguar maybe. And yeah, just lovely people. Always having a laugh. As you indeed have had a laugh with me today. Laugh at me today, I think, haven't you? Anyway, there you go. I'm not always perfect. In fact, I'm never perfect. But I will try harder, I promise. And I will endeavour to make sure that I have my app open on my phone next time I think I'm going live. I'm going to practice that. But in the meantime, thanks for bearing with me. Thanks for this extra bit I've had to do. Big thanks to our partners, Jetcraft, world's largest buyer and seller of executive jets, to OEM Exclusive, passionate suppliers of OEM upgrades for exotic and high-performance vehicles, to TrackNinja, lap timer and data app designed to help users improve their on-track car and driver performance through an analysis and an innovative data garage, to Alpinestars, makers of cutting-edge racing safety equipment and apparel, to Oscar Razor, Australia's highly rated five-blade razors for men and women. Watch out for the first edition of Grande Épreuve. You've seen the logo on the banner below. Your quarterly Formula One Super Slick magazine, brought to you soon by Oscar Razor. Links to all these great companies in the description below our videos. And finally, you can stay in touch by following our Motor Racing with Peter Windsor WhatsApp and YouTube communities platforms. Check out the language options for all our YouTube videos. Just go to settings and select your preferred audio track. And that's all from me, I think, from this live stream. Thanks for watching. Thanks for bearing with me. Take care. See you soon.